I've been married to a Vietnam combat veteran awarded the Purple Heart for more than 30 years. But before that love affair, my life started as the daughter of a World War II Purple Heart veteran who flew out of Italy in the B-24s. My dad completed 20 successful missions as the nose gunner when he went down over Yugoslavia and served 4 months as a POW. So as you can see, my life has been spent living with the realities of war, which I believe changes everything. When I met Jim in 1971, he rarely spoke about his Vietnam tour of duty in 1968-69. I think it would be difficult for any combat veteran to describe combat to someone that hasn't served.
And it's very hard to explain what it means to be caught in an ambush. What it's like to see somebody blown apart. It's hard to describe how scary it really is.
It was very common for us to get into action whenever we were out on patrol. Sometimes we'd get in action when we were in the process of being extracted by helicopter. Other times we get in action as soon as we went into a landing site.
It's a family, it's a tight-knit organization. We're a small unit anyway, and we operate like that. We're small, and we worked, and we had 7, 8-man teams, and we were precise, perfect. And then you lose those men. You lose part of you.
When our guys were killed, we had to stay with them. We basically stayed with them, so we were trapped and we had to be pulled out by a reactionary force.
35 of my Marines, my friends, went down in a CH-53 helicopter.
Quite a few of the guys were killed. Almost everyone was wounded.
By the time I was injured in my 7th month in the field, half the company had been killed or wounded, and we literally combined the company to make 2 platoons.
I went down to rappel to the crash site and was heading for a young Marine, and I fell 50, 60, 70 feet. I broke my back in 3 places.
Several guys were killed. One guy got the Medal of Honor for jumping on a grenade.
There's always a piece of you gets left there at the crash site or in the jungle.
When we got in combat, we usually were in big trouble.
It's a frightening experience. Somewhere along the line, the switch goes off. Probably my 3rd month in the field, we had an experience, and it was an absolutely frightening night. I thought my heart was just gonna be heard by everybody. And nothing happened. And I got up the next morning, and from there on out, I never felt anything. You just did what you had to do, and you didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. You just did it, one foot in front of the other. We would say, we're in the shit again, here we go again. But the idea of being overrun with fear or panic, it's not how you get the job done.
The combat experience got me to the point where I could easily step over bodies. If someone was wounded or killed, or someone was seriously wounded, if I couldn't do anything for that person and I had to take care of myself, I could do that and not pay any attention to the fact that somebody was hurt.
When I look back on it, I always kept thinking, you know, my combat experience wasn't that bad. You know, it wasn't Hamburger Hill, and I made it out and came back with a Purple Heart, Combat Infantry Badge, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 with a V, Air Medal.
Through telling the stories, he's tried to make peace with the war, but in reality, we know we both just found different ways to cope with it. For me, it was about detaching and putting lots of energy into my career, exercise program, and hobbies. For Jim, it was total concentration and immersion in projects around our acreage. I always call it his zooming mode, to accomplish virtually no downtime to relax and reflect.
And I vowed at that point that I would never look back. I would never allow myself to dwell on my experience in Vietnam, and that I wasn't going to waste any more time in my life. So I tried to bury my whole experience in Vietnam. I tried to forget about it.
Sometimes I just sort of work myself to exhaustion.
For the longest time, until 3 years ago, I needed very little sleep because sleep was not something I really wanted to do.
I have this persistent thought that goes through my head that if you stop, you're dead. And that's how it was now.
I would go for hours and hours and hours, and then I'd put myself to sleep by drinking. And that was kind of the way I would finally bring my body down.
My problem was when I did get out, I made a transition from, my childhood, high school, and went in straight from that into the Marine Corps, which is an entirely different experience for anybody. And to spend that much time in there, and then just to be thrust into the civilian societies, the civilian world.
The biggest thing is you would just fall in these black holes, just abysses, I call them. And a lot of them happened around May, and that's when we sort of lost a lot of our company.
And I went from job to job, relationship to relationship, friendship to friendship, trying to fill that void that I had in the Marine Corps. And it was the hardest thing I ever did.
I've been married 4 times. I've been divorced 4 times. I don't have any qualms about walking out of a relationship when it starts to get uncomfortable.
It's changed my life. There's no doubt about it. It's changed how I grew up, how I was shaped, how I met Jim and stuck with him.
About the only relationship I won't walk away from is the relationship I have with my 2 boys.
I just think my life changed, and I think the helicopter crash is what made it so bad on me. Because the chopper that actually crashed, I had actually missed a flight that would have put me on that helicopter. So
I had this profound sense of shame. Couldn't feel grief, couldn't feel honoring. It was a shame that, I don't feel anything.
a lot of times you flash back to those days, those situations, the people, the look, the smell. I mean, even today, you can think back to the smoke and the debris and the bodies, and you can still taste it and smell it in your nose, and you still think you're there. Sometimes it takes you back so deep that it makes you believe that you're still part of that day.
Jim's alcoholism became apparent in the late 70s, but became more than just heavy drinking and began to affect our relationship and his career. I've always been truly grateful that there was no domestic violence or a serious vehicular accident that prompted him to admit himself for treatment in 1982. In fact, he did that all on his own, which is his style, when I was out of town for my job. I had a sudden jolt of reality when I arrived back home. Detachment and denial had been my methods of coping.
My counselor, when I got sober, said, you probably need to go to the vet center, Jim. At that time, I was more concerned about just trying to stay sober. I said, let's do one thing at a time here. I mean, getting sober is a big enough deal without trying to deal with that. So, 22 years later, when I'm still sober, I finally had an epiphany. I basically came to the conclusion that I'm screwed. And if I do anything, it's going to get worse.
The dark side is the memories, the flashbacks, the night sweats, the nightmares. The nightmares that I've had all seem to surround something that reminds me of, I would say, a burned out helicopter But I mean, I remember in dreams where I have been in a burnt-out, rusted structure, and I was climbing down as fast as I could because something is behind me, chasing me. I don't know what it is, and there's just corpses on the beams as I'm running down, looking and telling me to, Gary, run. It's on your heels, run. But you're so frightened, you're so scared. You can't look behind to find out what it is.
I suppose the thing that has been the most pronounced throughout my entire life is having this sense of being alone. I am alone. And that's sad and frightening.
I was ready to kill myself. I literally was ready to kill myself. I thought of ways to kill myself. I no longer felt like my life had any meaning or significance. The only thing that was keeping me alive, really, were my 2 sons. That was it.
We pretend. I mean, I pretended for 35 years nothing happened.
I just I think that it altered and changed my life in ways that would have never, ever thought that would make me who I am today.
Because carrying this stuff, it will wear you out. It will wear you out, and I don't give up. And it gets to be a tough road.
I spent several months just in terrible depression. And finally, for some reason, I got in touch with one of my Marine Corps buddies. I looked him up, we talked to each other, and he said, Larry, you need some help. You need to go talk to the VA.
And it took me like, 13 years before I had this. I never knew it existed. And since then, it's made a huge difference in my life.
I saw it about 35 years later. That's not too late, but it was definitely long enough.
When he was ready, I knew it was time to make the connection. We had waited a long time, so I finally got on the phone and said, he's ready, you've just got to see him.
And coming down here and visiting with the other veterans, Vietnam vets, it just feels good because I don't have to explain myself, because they know.
And you're around other veterans, your own age group, same type of military experiences, that you can actually relate to. It is a buffer between you and the civilian world. I come here to the Veterans Outreach Program, and to me, I feel sometimes safer here than I do in my own home.
PTSD is not imaginary. It's not being weak-willed. It's not being strong enough. Somebody tries to blow your ass off, and you should have some kind of reaction to that. You set that aside during the mission because there's no other choice. But it's sort of like it gets downloaded in your psyche, and the experience ends, and you come home, but the power's still there.
The best result of hooking up with the VA is they've educated me on what's happened to my personality, and they've helped me understand my brain was changed by combat and killing and death. I react to situations differently than most people react to situations. That's important knowledge.
If there's one thing that would have been helpful is war is a real deal. Combat is a real deal, and it will change you. You can't expect to go into a combat zone and to think that you're going to come out and nothing changed.
And I was just amazed at how much help they gave and how good those people were. And then after several months of crazy Annette and her tremendous help, she saved my life. She really did.
Jim has been working with the center to change old habits and ways of coping. I can tell you it works. I see the positive changes and the peace he has worked hard to find in himself.
If it had not been for the Veterans Outreach Program, I'm absolutely convinced that my life would be entirely different, and I would have probably been in prison. I'd probably been on drugs, hooked on drugs and alcohol.
I would have tried to get help sooner. I would have not buried all my feelings for 30 years.
And it's been such a positive experience. The change in the last year has just been incredible. Jim has been much more relaxed, more out there to enjoy life.
If you saw death, if you killed people, your brain too changed. And don't think that you can make it out of this through the rest of your life without getting some help.
You cannot pretend like nothing happened, because something did happen.
Ultimately, what happens is you hurt people around you. And some of those people actually really care about you. And you can hurt them so much that they get to the point where they don't care about you anymore. And that's a tough way to spend your life.
So let's hope everybody else doesn't have to wait so long.
Don't do what I did and seek help from a Veterans Outreach Program. They're all over the country. They're easy to locate. They're usually in your phone books under U.S. government. You can find them. If not, call the local VA hospitals and they'll help you.
I hate the war for what it's done to those I love the most. When I see how it changes lives and bleeds the joy out of those that serve.
Being the soldier was easier than being the veteran. They teach you how to be a soldier. You train to be a soldier. But when you come back home, who trains you to be an honorable veteran?
There are people out there that can help.
You need to take the same kind of commitment that you made to become a soldier and take that same kind of commitment and courage to address the combat experience.
You are all heroes. Thank you for serving, and welcome home.